For thousands of years, there's been this story about one man, a king who supposedly stood right at the edge of the visible world and the invisible one. We know him as King Solomon. But what if the story we know is just the surface? What if he wasn't just a king or a prophet, but a scientist, working with realms we can barely even imagine? Today, we're diving into the forbidden science of Solomon. And that, right there, is the heart of what we're digging into. The source material we're looking at today argues that the real story of Solomon is so much deeper, and honestly way more technologically advanced than anything we are taught. It's a story of hidden knowledge, knowledge that, it claims, literally shook the ancient world to its core. So let's start with the very foundation of his kingdom, the ancient texts. You know, they describe a place where humans weren't the only ones doing the building. The source we're pulling from suggests something else. Or maybe someone else was working right alongside them. Now, we're not just talking about regular laborers here. According to these texts, Solomon's helpers were, well, different. Beings of pure consciousness, entities made from what's described as smokeless fire. In other words, the jinn. And this is usually where the conventional story just kind of stops. But our source material, it pushes way past that. It asks this really critical question. What if this whole thing wasn't about control? You know, not magic in the way we think of it with spells and commands. What if Solomon had figured out a specific kind of technology, a science that actually allowed him to communicate across different dimensions, different frequencies of existence?
And that right there brings us to the absolute core theory from our source. The idea that what everyone saw as supernatural power was really a mastery of a forgotten science. The science of frequency.
Okay, so check this out. This is where it gets really interesting because it reframes something we've all heard of, Solomon's magic ring. But what if it wasn't magic? The source suggests we look at it in a totally new way, not as a simple ornament, but as a highly advanced tool. Not just a symbol of power, but a resonance device. In today's terms, you could almost think of it as a quantum key, a very specific tool designed to unlock a very specific system because it was encoded with precise frequencies. And the science behind this is totally real. It's resonance. I mean, think about an opera singer hitting that perfect note and shattering a wine glass. They're not touching it. They're just matching the glass's natural resonant frequency with their voice. This theory basically says Solomon understood that same principle, but on a level we've completely forgotten, allowing him to interact with beings that literally exist on a different frequency than us. And this whole idea gets even stronger when you look at another fascinating detail from the old texts. It says his commands to the jinn, they weren't just spoken words, not like how you and I talk. It was something way, way more precise. The source claims his commands were actually structured phrases, specific patterns, and precise codes. So think about it less like a king shouting an order and more like a programmer inputting a line of code into a computer. You get the syntax right, you get the pattern right, and you get the result you want. And that right there, that's the whole ballgame. This is the core concept, words as technology. Language not just for talking to each other, but as a functional tool, a way to interact with and maybe even influence the very fabric of reality itself, or at least other dimensions of it.
Okay, so if Solomon actually had this kind of understanding, this science, what could he do with it? Well, the legends say he used it to build things that were, by all accounts, completely impossible for human labor back then. I mean, when you really read the stories, they're just filled with these incredible descriptions. Massive foundation stones that were moved into place by forces nobody could see. Structures built on a scale that just defies the logistics of that era. The source we're looking at points to this as pretty compelling evidence of a controlled, non-human workforce. But, and this is a really important distinction the source makes, this wasn't some kind of master-slave relationship. It was cooperation. The theory goes that Solomon didn't dominate these entities. He just understood the rules of their world. He understood the physics of their frequency, and he used that knowledge to work with them. So all of this, it leads to the biggest, most mind-bending theory from the source material. And it revolves around his most famous structure of all, the temple. The idea here is that the temple was way, way more than just a place to worship. So you have to ask, was it just stone and wood? Or was it something else entirely? A machine, maybe? A device built for a very, very specific purpose?
Our source suggests it was definitely the latter.
The design itself is laid out like a blueprint for something incredible. The incredibly precise use of sacred geometry, the perfect angles, all those stories about hidden chambers, according to this theory, none of that was just for decoration. It was functional. It was all designed to create a stable bridge, a kind of gateway to make contact between our realm and others. Stable.
So when you put it all together, what you might be looking at is a massive antenna, a carefully constructed device built for one primary reason: to communicate with entities that exist beyond the normal limits of our human senses. Which, of course, brings us to the most obvious question of all. If any of this is even remotely true, why isn't it common knowledge? Why, as the source claims, was this knowledge buried? Why did the kings who came after Solomon seem to be so afraid of what he knew? And maybe the answer is right here, in this final way of looking at it. The ultimate conclusion from the source is that Solomon's gift wasn't supernatural power. It was access. Access to a science, a kind of user's manual for the universe that's way older than our own civilization. And access to that kind of knowledge, well, that can be a very dangerous thing. And that leaves us with one last big idea to think about. If Solomon had access to this hidden science, who else did, before him and after him? What if this knowledge, a frequency of resonance, of communicating with other realms, what if it isn't actually lost at all, but just hidden, flowing like a secret river through our most sacred texts and our oldest traditions, but written only in codes, just waiting for someone to figure out how to read them again?